As you can see, Sam Quinn, we have here. He's joined us. He's a CBS Sports basketball writer since 2019. He's worked previously with Bleacher Report, 24/7 Sports. He's from New York, went to NYU, and has roots in Florida and California. Sam, thank you for joining us. My name is Jacob, um, and we have here Obi and Riley. Um, and we really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. I caught the end of the betting segment. I'm going Pels tonight.
Yeah.
Um, De'Aaron Fox has so much trouble with Herb Jones. I'm taking him. I'm taking the Pelicans in that matchup until I have a reason not to.
Yeah, makes sense. Herb Jones is a great perimeter defender.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just wanted to obviously just talk hoops with you.
Yeah.
It is what you do. It is what you know. And I don't know if you just want to go over the standings as the playoffs are coming very quickly. The regular season's coming to close, and obviously we cover the Pacific Division. I don't know, you can cover the whole NBA, the Western Conference, or you can just check out the Pacific Division with us.
Yeah, I'm good with whatever you guys want to do. It's a pretty slow day. It seems like I have some time, so just whatever you guys want to do is good with me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so as we know, four of the five teams in the division are taking up all those play-in spots. Obviously, there's still some room to move around. The Warriors and Lakers clinched the play-in spots, just within those four positions. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't think anybody in that division is making it past the first round. I think Dallas is going to take care of the Clippers, and then, God, I think it might be all four of them in the play-in of the other four. I just think Suns are just very top-heavy. We saw last night Bones Highland just, what do you have, 37?
hmm
If you're giving up 37 to Bones Highland, you're giving up 90 to Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. The Lakers can't defend, and they're having... I don't really want to say they're having injury issues at the worst time, because getting poked in the eye is pretty random. Yeah, it's just... I don't really love anyone in the division right now. I think it's kind of a changing of the guard, where for the last however many years it's been the LeBron, Steph, KD, NBA, and now they're all kind of phasing out, or at least going into a different phase of their career, and the younger guys are ascending. It's kind of an awkward position for me to be in as working for a major media company where, like, I would love it if we had the Lakers versus the Lakers in the finals every year, like David Stern always dreamed of. But it seems like we're getting smaller markets. It seems like it's going to be Denver, Minnesota, teams like that. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty brief postseason for the Pacific.
And I had a personal question. I mean, for the Kings, no one is really on board with them, and I feel like some of the reasons are justified. People were calling like Sabonis he's not like he's putting up great numbers, but he's not really what these superstar bigs. What do you really make of the Kings season and just like their expectations going into the postseason after having like such a great start last time?
Yeah, I think last year they had the greatest offense in NBA history by efficiency. I think none of us believed they're the greatest offensive team that we've ever seen. Even you get to the playoffs and I don't want to say exposed is the wrong word, but like Sabonis was not the same player in the playoffs that he was in the regular season. That's a team that very clearly needs a defensive anchor somewhere. It's not going to be at center for most teams. It is center, but Sabonis is so essential to the offense that it can't be there. Maybe they trade for an Alex Caruso type, like somebody like that, because they need an A-list defender in there somewhere. The ideal setup for them, that's probably like their sustainable form of winning, is let's be the fourth best offense and the 12th best defense. And right now I think they're like 12th or something on offense. I don't know where exactly they are. And then they're worse than that on defense. Without Monk and without Herter, they kind of lack any real pop. It's just Fox and Sabonis offensively. So, look, I think last year, the actual result at the end of the year, I think they won, 49 in the regular season last year. They're at 45 now. The records aren't all that different. It's just the West is so condensed that, that difference of 3-4 wins can be a 3 seed versus in the play-in. I don't think they're that materially different. I think it's just a matter of they have this extreme flaw defensively where they don't have any sort of anchor, and until they get that guy, it's not really going to matter what they do on offense.
All right, Sam, I actually have a question for you as well. Thank you for being here, by the way. But so just for the sake of talking about the Pacific Division, for the play-in tournament, if for the sake of the question it does end up being Suns, Kings, Lakers, Warriors, who would you have coming out of that?
I guess I have to take the Suns over the Kings just because the Kings are so beaten up. I'm not crazy about that. I think if the Kings had stayed healthy and it was Suns Pelicans, for instance, I am just not liking anything I'm seeing out of the Suns right now. The defense is such a mess. The offense is so your turn, my turn. But the Kings are just so undermanned right now that I guess I have to take the Suns in that game. Lakers Warriors is interesting. I think in two of the losses that the Lakers had against the Warriors, Anthony Davis either left at halftime or didn't play. Anthony Davis is the difference maker in that matchup. We saw that in the series last year, where just the Warriors had no answer for him whatsoever as a shot blocker. Their offense now, obviously, they don't have the spacing that they used to have. They're still kind of confused in their rotation a little bit. Like, every time they think, oh, we're going to play Draymond at center with Kuminga and Wiggins, or like now it's Trace Jackson Davis, or last year it was Looney. It's weird for me to say this about a four-time champion. I don't feel like they know who they are, and we're 80 games into the season. It's so much as just either Steph is going to bail us out or he isn't. And the Lakers at this point, at least, like, they have an identity. It's the bully ball thing. They're shooting more threes. They've gone so all on offense. I think since February 1st, give or take, whenever they put Rui Hachimura in the starting lineup, I think they're ranked second in offense. It might be third now. They're flip-flopping with Indiana. The Lakers know who they are. They're playing well generally. I mean, I don't think they're playing well enough to make a real run, but like they're playing with the best version of this team. The Warriors really aren't. I'd pick the Lakers in that game. And then you have Lakers-Kings. Look, the Kings have beaten the Lakers how many times in a row? What, they're 4-0 this year. I think, what's that stat that went around? That Sabonis is like 9-0.
It was like
9-0
9-0.
versus Davis.
Undefeated. Something
I
ridiculous.
don't know, like, I don't think there's some issue that, like, oh, Sabonis is this unsolvable problem for Davis. I think the real problem is the Lakers start an all-offense starting five, and nobody can stay in front of De'Aaron Fox. Like, De'Aaron Fox can score 50 in that game, and poof, the Lakers are gone. It would feel a little irresponsible of me to pick the Lakers on the road against a team that's beaten them 4 times this year. So I guess I would say the Kings, but truth is the Kings are so banged up right now. I don't know. Like, I don't feel great about any of them. I think whoever is the 8th seed in the West, that's just cannon fodder for the Nuggets. It almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In a way, I think it would be better for the Lakers to lose early, frankly. Like, they have real problems that the last thing they need. Last year, they were the 7th seed, I think. But the bracket really broke just right for them, where they get Memphis in the first round, and Memphis is really banged up. And they get Golden State in the second round, which is kind of a perfect matchup for them with Davis. And all of a sudden, they're in the Western Conference Finals, and they're thinking of themselves as this championship contender, when the reality is, like, no, they weren't really one of the 4 best teams. It just so happened it was so condensed that if you get on the right side of the bracket, it works out. I think it would probably be better for them if they got the Nuggets early, get knocked out, and then go into the offseason saying, okay, we have a ways to go here. We have to make significant changes. If we bring back this exact team, the same thing's going to happen again.
Yeah, it kind of gave the Lakers like a false hope. But so you mentioned the Clippers. You don't think they can do damage in the playoffs. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, they can't defend. And especially, like, look at who they're playing in the first round. I think the Dallas matchup locked in last night. I think home court could flip in that series. I think the Clippers need one more win to secure it. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah.
If you're starting James Harden in a playoff, especially however old he is now, 35, 36, you're starting that guy in a series against Luka Doncic, Luka is just going to hunt him and pick and roll every time down the floor. It's going to be that simple. Until the Clippers find a way to keep Harden out of the play, and I am very pessimistic they can do that, I just don't see how they're going to get stops. And if you look at what happened when they played last, I think 2021, Luka was just incredible in the early quarters of those games. Then he would run out of gas at the end because he was the only guy. Now they have Kyrie Irving. Now Luka can really pace himself a little bit more, make sure he's at his best late in these games. I just think the Mavericks are a lot better than the last time they played, and the Clippers are just older and worse.
Just a little bit more on the Clippers. I know there's they've been going they have a lot of ups and downs this season. And one of the questions one of the reporters asked James Harden is like, are you guys this team that were kind of going up and down, 500 in the last 10 games, or were you that team that was winning like, what was it, like 10, 15 games straight, or like had a
They
like
won
ridiculous
26
run?
to 31. They went 26-5.
Yeah, and so I guess like that question is like, is this who the Clippers are now that they're like somewhat kind of healthy, or it's just the Mavs are kind of inevitable at this point?
I think it's somewhere in between. I think 26-5 is a reflection of the fact that, like, look, they really do have a ton of talent, right? Like, they have 2 superstars, and then just separately they have 2 MVPs. Obviously, you can quibble with the fit of Westbrook and Harden and all those guys. They have a ton of shot creation on that team. Norm Powell's pretty overqualified for the just go score a bunch of point 6-man role. Like, they're so deep that PJ Tucker doesn't really play when they're healthy. Like, they are very talented. I'm not denying that. And they really strung together a great period earlier in the season. I just think the point they're at now is I don't trust them to get stops. Like, I get Kawhi and Paul George are not the defenders they used to be. They're still pretty good. Kawhi can be great at times, but, like, this notion that they're Jordan and Pippen on the perimeter like they might have been 5 years ago, like, no, that's gone. Like, they can't stay in front of opposing guards. Whether it was going to be Luka or SGA or Murray, somebody was going to expose that. I think in the modern NBA, like, it's really, we fixate so much on having the rim protector, the Gobert, the Wembanyama, et cetera, et cetera. And in the regular season, I think that's the best foundation for a defense that's going to have the highest replacement value. Like, oh, if you have a Rudy Gobert type, our defense is always going to be pretty good. When you get to the playoffs, having those guys who can really defend at the point of attack becomes so much more important. And I just really don't trust the Clippers to stay in front of anybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we had a couple different questions, like other than the standings. Obi, do you want to go ahead and ask your first question you have?
Yeah, this is more so questions for you instead of just like the standings. And so my first question is, I know your job as a reporter, it's not really to be biased, but like from what you've seen, do you think like this division, the Pacific Division specifically, gets covered differently compared to like the other teams, the other divisions? Whether that means more coverage, more in depth coverage, and like why do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Like, look, nobody wants to say this. Nobody wants to say, like, oh, we cover some teams more than others. I know there are a lot of small market fans that just like, oh, why don't you cover my team? Well, the truth is more people want to read about the Lakers than want to read about the Pacers. Like, I'm sorry that's the case. Media tends to go towards what people are interested in reading about, listening to, watching, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, I would say the 2 highest profile teams in the league right now are the Lakers and the Warriors. It makes sense that they would be covered quite a bit. And then just generally in my experience, stars get covered a lot. Like, it's easier to make a decision to cover something based on an individual player versus like a team in a market. Well, Kevin Durant's in Phoenix, and Kawhi and Paul George and James Harden are in one of our Clippers. So yeah, there's just a lot to work with there. There's a lot to talk about. I think there's also sort of a track record thing where, for lack of a better way of putting this, like, I'm just thinking about one young team, Orlando, for instance. Paolo Banchero's story hasn't really been told yet, and we kind of need to see how things play out on the court. There's not really a narrative there. There's not really there are stories. Like, certainly we can talk about how well he's played and the things like that, but there aren't these, like, overarching narratives about his career yet. Those are going to get formed with time. You look at these Pacific Division teams, and it's like, we have 20 years of LeBron. We have so much to talk about. We have so many ways to, like, tie in what he's doing now versus what he was doing 10 years ago, or how it compares to this great player or that great player, other eras of Lakers history. There's just a lot more to work with these teams in particular. Now, it's interesting. I mean, just to go a little bit inside baseball, these 5 teams really vary wildly on how they treat the media. Like, I'm trying to think of the kind way to put this. The Clippers aren't super helpful to reporters. They're not going to go out of their way to help you set up interviews. Their guys are not super talkative. The Warriors, on the other hand, like, Raymond Ritter is the only NBA PR person that fans have heard of because he gives everybody whatever, not any interview that they want, but, like, the Warriors are very accommodating, and they want media in the building. They want people talking to their players and getting their stories out there. That contributes to why we talk so much about the Warriors. The Warriors are a very accessible organization. That said, there was also just so much interest that it almost had to be that way, right? Like, I think at the peak, when they had Durant, 2016, 2017, that era,
Yeah.
I think The Athletic alone had like half a dozen beat writers for them. And like, there were a lot of other outlets that treated it similarly. So it's a combination of things. It's a combination of interest. It's a combination of market, players, how they treat the media themselves. But like, yeah, we can be realistic about this. More people want to read about the Lakers than read about, I don't know, the Pistons. Of course people are going to cover them more.
Absolutely. Thank you. Riley?
So, just a little bit of like stat things I noticed. I was kind of just like looking through your Twitter or X, just kind of looking for some fun facts from you. And you mentioned like a week or two ago that since the Lakers put Rui Hachimura in their starting lineup, they had the NBA's third best offense by like offensive rating. But through the same time, like from like when you posted that, their defense was also 22nd. It's something you've mentioned before, like in answering questions of ours about the standings. But like, do you think that there's an answer on their team to help fix the defense, or is that something that's going to have to be addressed in the offseason?
Well, I think they could fix the defense. It would just come at the expense of the offense, right? I mean, look at where they were around the in-season tournament in like mid-December. At one point, I think they were like, third, fourth, fifth on defense, something like that. But they couldn't score. The way this roster is built, LeBron and AD are obviously mega stars. I don't say they're great on both ends. Davis is, LeBron. Sometimes he is, sometimes the effort is a little bit waning. But like, okay, those are your two cornerstone guys. If you look at the rest of the roster, everybody else is like generally a good offensive player or a good defensive player, right? And like earlier in the season, the way that the minutes were being distributed leaned a little bit more towards the defensive guys. As the season has progressed, like, Jared Vanderbilt's out for the year, Cam Reddish was injured for a while, now they're starting Hachimura, they're starting Reeves, they're starting Russell. These are all guys that lean towards offense. And look, in the regular season, you can get away with being really good on one end and not so good on the other. When you get to the playoffs, you kind of need both. And we saw this against Denver last year. They didn't have guys who could do both. And sure enough, they got swept. Look, there's not a great roster in the entire NBA that is so stacked towards one end of the ball, right? Like, Milwaukee coming into this season was one team that was kind of like that. Well, they've been a pretty big disappointment because they can't get stops. Phoenix can't get stops. If you're only good on one end of the floor, you can win 45 games, you can maybe win 50 with some luck. You're not going to win a championship. That's not how this works anymore. So the truth is, like, the Lakers, as they go into this offseason, have to figure out the roster. The goal should be, don't go after stars. Don't go after high points per game types. Like, I jokingly call the Lakers team points per game because when they acquire players, it's almost always guys who, like, score a lot of points but maybe don't do a lot of other stuff. They have this sort of fixation with high draft picks, high point guys, like guys with high profile, star power, essentially. But even as you go down to the role players, they love guys who were really highly ranked prospects in high school and college. No, just get guys who are like pretty good on both ends of the floor. Get guys who do multiple things. That's been this front office's biggest weakness, is that they just get so hyper-fixated on the name value that they kind of ignore, like, oh, Alex Caruso's the best defensive guard in the NBA. Maybe we should keep him and not Talen Horton-Tucker, the guy who's super athletic and like maybe has a really bright future, but has also never been a good NBA player. Like, that's what this front office's weakness is. Take those first-round picks you have to trade this offseason, turn them into 3-and-D guys, give yourself a balanced team, and that's how you're probably going to contend. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to say, oh, let's trade for Trae Young. That'll fix everything. And it won't because, they're already really good on offense and bad on defense. So I don't trust them to actually do it, but it's a pretty simple calculation for me. They don't have two-way players.
Yeah, it makes sense. And just like a general NBA question, I know there's been a lot of hype about, Anthony Edwards, obviously Wemby and other young guys. But who do you think, as LeBron and Steph, players like them, who their careers come to a close, who do you think could be the next face of the NBA? I know there's been a lot of talk about, like Jason Tatum, he could be, but is he like that type of guy? Jokic, he is that guy, but he doesn't want to be the face of the NBA. Who do you think plays like it and wants to be the face of the NBA?
I think about this a lot. It's kind of, we have this era of stars that entered the NBA. I'm going to just broadly define an era like 2013 or 14 through like 2018 or 19, where for some reason or another they could have been the guy, but they're not. Like Jason Tatum, great player, kind of boring. Zion obviously has had the injury, had the conditioning issues. John Morant's had the off-court things. Like, there have been guys that have come into the league that, like, feasibly, in terms of talent, could be that guy, but for one reason or another, they haven't. Meanwhile, like, the league has frankly gotten pretty lucky that LeBron and Steph and KD have lasted as long as they have, because, like, say LeBron, you know, like in the past, guys would play 14, 15 years and retire. If the NBA didn't have LeBron James over the last 5 years, I think that would have been pretty bad from a marketing perspective. He's lasted as the face of the league so much longer than anybody else. Then we have this kind of dead period of those stars. I think the league is very fortunate for a variety of reasons that they've had a really good last few crop of rookies where Anthony Edwards has the personality, right? Like Jason Tatum is probably a little bit a better player. Anthony Edwards has the personality to be one of the faces of the league. And then Wemby is, I mean, I'll just say it, he's the best rookie I've ever seen. Not just in the NBA, but in any sport. And not only that, I think there's a lot of value in novelty. I think it really means something like, I mean, we look at this in women's college basketball that's had this huge explosion in popularity. There have been great women's college basketball players for years, for decades, for however long. But Caitlin Clark came in and did things that were new with her shooting range, the incredible passing, things that we hadn't really seen before. And lo and behold, the popularity skyrockets. I think there's a little bit of that to Wemby, where this guy is doing things at his size that, like, we didn't think were possible. Like, I didn't think it was physically possible to put back dunk your own missed three-pointer. But he did it. And he's going to keep doing these things that we've never seen before. And I think that's how you're going to attract a lot of casual fans. That's what happened with Steph, frankly. Like, there was a period, I would say early Warriors dynasty, where, like, Steph was almost more popular than LeBron, not because he was a better player, but because he was doing these things that we hadn't seen before. So I think there's a lot of room for really interesting rivalries. I think Wemby versus Chet is going to be a really fun rivalry for a long time, just given their similarities. Anthony Edwards versus Wemby is going to be another really interesting because they're so different. Personality, playing style, body type, etc., etc. Go down the list. There are a lot of good players coming in. Like Cooper Flagg is somebody that everybody's really excited about. I think the league is generally in a pretty healthy place, and they got lucky with the timing of all of this. Because if we were asking these questions 5 years ago, I don't know that we'd have good answers. Because again, like, for one reason or another, there was this entire era of players that you would have hoped would have come through and been those guys, and they just haven't been. If we were really at a point where, like, the true faces of the NBA, not just the best players, but, like, the marketing face, the people that, like, you want to put forth to the casual fans, this is why you watch. If that was just Tatum and Jokic, these guys who, like, aren't interested in the fame side as much, and aren't really, like, you know, interesting from, Jokic certainly is as a player, but, like, aren't interested with all of the other things that are required out of being face of the league. The league would be in a pretty dangerous spot, and thankfully, LeBron and Steph and KD lasted so long that we now have another generation coming up that I think can handle that.
Yeah, nice take. Okay, and then just real quick, what do you think of the new rule with the minimum game requirement for regular season awards? It seems like it made some noise earlier in the season, and with players like Donovan Mitchell, who, like, mid-season or whatever, he couldn't make any awards after All-Star break because he missed a certain amount of games. Like, what do you think? How do you think that's helped or benefit or hurt the league?
I think it's really stupid. I think it's one of the worst rules they've done in a long time. The idea of it from the league's perspective, and they're not going to say this outright, but this is the case. They're negotiating a TV deal right now. And I don't want to say, like, oh, they're in trouble, but you guys know all of the facts going into this. TV rights or TV revenue, TV ratings, it's all down. The cable bundle is not what it used to be. They're kind of in this position where they really need their stars to play as many games as possible to help get the biggest TV deal that they can. This was one thing that they threw out there as a possibility to try to fix that. I mean, I guess, like, the Clippers guys played more. LeBron and AD happened to be healthier. Like, okay, I guess there's been a little bit less load managing. From an awards standpoint, though, I just think it's really stupid. Like, I think there was almost an internal way that the voters handled this, where, like, nobody's going to give MVP to a guy who plays 30 games, right? Like, there's a common sense to it. And I think it should be, if you're trusting voters to handle these awards, and these awards aren't just trophies, by the way, like, it's built into the Supermax formula that, like, this affects how much money guys make.
Right.
I think you have to trust the voters in that scenario to make the common sense choices to say, like, well, this guy was really good. I don't think he played enough games. I don't think that, like, oh, you can be the most valuable player in the league if you played 65, but play one fewer game and, like, no, it's completely undoable. That's a little ridiculous to me. And sometimes, frankly, like, I'll throw this one back a few years. I picked Joel Embiid as Rookie of the Year when he played 31 games. My reasoning for that was that the award is not Most Valuable Rookie, it's Rookie of the Year. Who is the rookie from that year that I'm going to remember? And 5 years, 6 years later, however many years later it is, I only remember Embiid. I don't remember a minute of Malcolm Brogdon's rookie year, and he won Rookie of the Year. It's a little ridiculous to me. Like, I think it has to be left to the voters' discretion to decide, like, if this is some historical landmark, if this is how we're going to remember a season, trust the voters to get it right. I think it's pretty rare that a guy can play 64 games and be the most valuable player in the league. I don't think it's impossible. Bill Walton did it in, I think, 1978. He played 58 games. And what were the Blazers? They were like 50-8 in those games, something like that. I think you just have to trust the voters. And, like, look, not every year is going to be the same. Like, some years the field is going to be so crowded for some of these awards that, oh, you play 64 games, like, sorry, you're out. Some years it's going to be a weak year, and you'd rather have a guy who was incredible for 62 games than have a guy who was just very, very good for 80. Like, I don't know. I don't like forcing voters to conform to something like this when the motives are very clearly economic. I don't think it's something that's meant to preserve the history of these awards. I don't think it's something that's meant to, make sure the contracts are fair. If anything, there are going to be real negative effects contractually when, like, what happens if we have a year where, I don't know, 8 of the best 15 players don't play 65 games, and suddenly the 24th best player in the NBA is eligible for a Supermax? That's a dangerous place to be. I don't know. I really don't like it. I get what they were trying to do. I just don't think they went about it the right way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I was just going to say, I have the stats up here, and LeBron won it in 2011, 2012, playing 62, Giannis in 2019.
That was a lockout year. A lot of these years, the Giannis
okay.
year, the Giannis year was the COVID year.
Yeah.
The LeBron year was a lockout.
Okay.
There was another one, I think, Karl Malone
won
51 year, but that was a lockout year.
Okay.
Side note, while we're on this topic, this is just like a pet topic of mine. The year that Giannis won is, I think, 2020, the COVID year. Mm-hmm. That's one of the most interesting MVP races I ever remember, and nobody talks about this. Giannis got hurt right before the COVID shutdown. We don't know how long he would have missed, but, like, he got hurt that week, I think. Like, I think he might have gotten hurt Sunday or Monday, and then the season ended on, like, a Wednesday. If that season doesn't end due to COVID, LeBron probably wins his 5th MVP because he has all this momentum. They had just beaten the Bucks and the Clippers on national TV a couple nights earlier. Like, within the week they'd done that. LeBron ends up finishing 2nd. But I think about that a lot. Like, LeBron would have a 5th MVP if literally any other season that all happened. It just happened to happen during COVID when Giannis would have time to recover. So, it's kind of a sliding doors moment. But that's just one of those things where, look, every year is going to be different. Every year is going to have totally unique traits. And it should be up to the voters to sift through that instead of the league saying, no, you're only allowed to vote for these guys instead of those guys.
This is a perfect segue into this fun segment I had. So we're going to do like a little NBA season awards, but only for this Pacific Division. So, like, who's the MVP for the Pacific Division, Defensive Player of the Year, stuff like that. So, you guys down, or?
Yeah, let's get it.
All right,
it's
cool.
funny because as I think about who the MVP for the division would be, it feels like almost everybody was disappointing league-wide on some level.
Oh, yeah.
We're like, okay, well, Steph was great early on, and his shooting hasn't been great for a while, and Kawhi had that awesome stretch, but then he started to have the injuries that he's had lately, and they started to collapse. I'm going to struggle with this one, but I might just have to think back to, like, who did I put on my All-NBA ballot? Who did I ultimately decide on? But yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we'll start with you, Sam. Who would your MVP be for the Pacific Division?
I think my MVP and my Defensive Player of the Year for the division for both would be Anthony Davis. I feel a little bad if he had this season defensively and he was on a team that was more defensively oriented, he might have had a real shot at winning Defensive Player of the Year, like league-wide. The metrics are like pretty favorable to him compared to Rudy Gobert. Everybody's behind Wemby, but that's an entirely different discussion. He was clearly the most consistent Laker. The defense without him, I know the numbers for a lot of the year were kind of wonky. There was weird shooting stuff behind that, but without him, the defense probably would be the worst in the NBA or close to it. He's so reliable on offense now. Like, look, the jumper is never going to be what it was in the bubble, but like he's become a really reliable all-around offensive player. Improved a lot as a passer. I think if you take LeBron off of this Lakers team, you can still get by with the ball handling that they have with Russell and Reeves playing as well as they have. Like, I think they're 4-2 in their last 6 games that LeBron has missed. They beat the Bucks twice. You know, they've had a couple of big wins without LeBron. When Davis is not in the game, like, they're just sunk. They've got nothing. So I'm going with AD for MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. I'd hear there are plenty of viable candidates for MVP. Defensive Player of the Year feels like a lock, right?
Yeah. And I guess we'll go with you, Riley, MVP. And then I guess you can do Defensive Player of the Year as well. Yeah.
First of all, Defensive Player of the Year, completely agree. Anthony Davis. There really wasn't anyone else to fully consider. MVP, I did go Kawhi. I think a lot of the Clippers not being as kind of not being as good lately has been mostly due to Kawhi being out of the lineup. I think he's key to them having any shred of defense. I think he's elevated them a lot because up until recently he has played pretty much the whole season. And I think that's been massive to them actually being in the 4th seed and being the one Pacific team not in the play-in.
I think he hit the highest peaks this season. I think that's a totally fair pick. The inconsistency is why I didn't pick him, but I think if you want to say who was the best player at their best in the division this year, Kawhi is a totally fair pick.
Jacob?
I agree with you, Riley. But personally, I mean, despite the record, despite being 10th in the West, I'm gonna say Curry just because of, I mean, who are the Warriors without Curry? They're absolutely nothing. I mean, you can say that every year. But I just think, despite having times where he struggled, I think just leading the league in clutch points, he's really showed up this year. And then also I'm going AD, Defensive Player of the Year. I think it's pretty easy pick.
Clean sweep for a defensive
player. The Curry
player.
thing is so interesting. If you look up and down that roster, like, how many guys on the Warriors had better years than we would have expected coming into the year, right? Like, Draymond obviously he misses a quarter of the season to suspension. Clay obviously he's literally a bench player now. Andrew Wiggins like he was terrible most of the year. Like, just go up and down the guys who they want. Looney out of the rotation now. Like, look at the guys they won a championship with, and they're all like meaningfully, I don't want to say worse in Draymond's case, but like they were all much worse this season than they would have hoped for. You're right. Like, Curry is the only thing that held them together. Curry is their identity. Like, their offense only works because of how much attention defenses have to pay to Curry. So, like, again, I get it. There's everybody in this division has a pretty flawed case, but there are a lot of guys that have viable ones. So I do totally get it.
And then we'll just move on to our most improved player, or we can call this like a comeback player as well because it's going to be a little choppy. We'll start with you, Sam.
I feel a little weird saying most improved, but like, just hear me out. The guy who comes to mind is Rui Hachimura, because he comes over from Washington last year, and he is almost immediately better with the Lakers. I don't know if that means he got better as a player, or he just like happened to find himself in a better situation. But then he goes through the playoffs and he makes this insane amount of his threes, like 40-something%, whatever it is. And my take coming into the year was like, oh, this is fake. He's not this good of a shooter. This is like, that's nonsense. He's going to go back to what he was in Washington. And the opposite happened. Like, not only is he shooting just as well, he's been better at basically everything. The Lakers season changed when they put him in the starting lineup. Like, he went from a guy in Washington a year or so ago who, like, skilled, but like you're not even really sure he's like a viable rotation guy in a good team, to like, no, this is a really reliable two-way starter for the most part. The defense is iffy, but it's a lot better than it used to be. But this is a guy who can start on a really good team, and that's I have a hard time. Like, there's nobody else in the division. I'm just realizing now I forgot about Kuminga, who also has a good case, but I'm sticking with Rui just considering how well he's played over the last couple months. But yeah, most of the division being as old as it is, it's hard to find improvement candidates.
Thank you, Riley.
Yeah, I went Kuminga. I think kind of with what Sam said, a lot of the Warriors outside of Curry not having good years, I think Kuminga's elevated that team big time. I think a lot of people forget that in most years, 44 and 35 has you a lot higher than the 10 seed. And I think Kuminga stepping up and being a very good player, starting for a while, has been massive for them, and he's been a big time player for them. I think his improvement has been key for them.
Jacob?
Yeah, I was actually also gonna say Kuminga, because I think for years, or ever since he's been drafted, he's always that player. It's like, oh, he has so much potential. When is that gonna come? I think Steve Kerr got frustrated with it last year, and I think finally Kuminga's, we'll see how he is moving forward, because he's still only 21, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I mean, he's a freak athlete, and he had stretches where he averaged close to 20 points a game, and I would say he's my pick for most improved.
It's interesting. No one wanted to bring up D'Angelo Russell, his resurgence as well. I felt like
I wondered when you brought up comeback player. That's fair.
That's why it was a little slippery. I was just like, he's technically having his. You could argue he's having his best
trade deadline D'Lo.
Yeah, so
he broke the record for most threes by a Laker, which sounds super impressive. Like, oh, this team that won whatever it is, 16, 17 championships. But then you actually look at the list, and it's like, oh, they've just never had a good shooter before. Like, the old record was held by Nick Van Exel. Like, it's just kind of wild to think about. That you could, I think he said it in, 95. But the Lakers have just been such a mid-range, interior-defined team that Russell is just so different than anybody else they've ever had before that it does really stand out. And, yeah, you're right. Like, when they signed him, I was under the impression, oh, this is a contract they're going to trade at the deadline. They re-signed him as cap filler, essentially. And no, he's been their third best player all year.
Yep. And this next one was rookie of the year, but this division is pretty old. So I guess this award is best young player among these 5 teams. I guess, Sam, do you want to start first?
When you said Rookie of the Year, I was scanning my brain who's a rookie? Does Leon Ellis count? Then I remembered Brandon Podziemski. Okay, we've got somebody. Brandon Podziemski is just such a weird player, and I really love players. Right behind me, I have Boris Diaw's signed number. I have a real soft spot for guys who do things that their position doesn't normally dictate that you do. Brandon Podziemski's rebounding is just such a wild, out there trait that no other shooting guard really has, but it's so essential to them, especially when they play small as often as they do. Obviously, the scoring's been really important. As a rookie, this guy from Santa Clara supplanted Klay Thompson from the starting lineup of the Warriors. 4-time NBA champion playing for a contract, now coming off of the bench because the number 19 pick in the draft or whatever has outplayed him. That's pretty meaningful. I don't think he's ever going to be a star, but he's this delightfully weird player that fits in so well with what the Warriors do. And so much of their success during the dynasty years was built around having this generationally weird player in Draymond Green. Having a guy who is a center on defense and a point guard on offense and everything in between whenever you need him to be. It's kind of fun that they're, I don't want to say getting rejuvenated, but the next wave of Warriors has a sort of spiritually similar guy in Podziemski.
Riley?
I was pretty much just deciding between Podziemski and Trace Jackson Davis. I think they've both given a lot of value to the Warriors this year. I also went Podziemski in the end, because I think, like you said, kind of with supplanting Klay in the lineup, that is a very big deal, especially for the Warriors. But yeah, there was kind of slim pickings for this for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I also had to think who is a rookie, and yeah, other than Podziemski, yeah, I think he's Rookie of the Year for the Pacific.
Cool.
I do want to give Keon Ellis the shout out though. Like, number one, that's the kind of player that if you're trying to make the jump from 45 wins to 50-55, you kind of have to hit on that guy, the like undrafted or like unheralded rookie who does all the little things. Like that is really meaningful, and that's somebody where if they do jump back up to the top half of the West next year, I think he's going to be a big reason why. But yeah, I think Podziemski and Jackson Davis have just been spectacular for the Warriors. And like, if they didn't have these two rookies, man, maybe Houston would have passed them.
That's a great point. And they were right there. Got knocked out. But we're not a Houston podcast. We're not a Houston podcast, Pacific Division. And I guess the last award is the new one, Clutch Award. I know Fox won it last year. I think Curry and LeBron are on the run this year. So I guess we'll start with you, Sam.
Yeah, it's Curry. There was a point, I haven't checked the numbers on this in a little while. There was a moment where like he had made more clutch threes than I think like half of the teams in the NBA. Like the raw point total that he has in the clutch, I think he's still the leader. If not, DeMar DeRozan has passed him. But, you know, just having that three-point shooting late in games, spacing the floor is so much harder in the last few minutes when defenses are really keyed in. You don't really have the same off-ball stuff that you can get away with in the second quarter. Steph makes all that stuff possible. They can't run their offense late in games without Steph. Even if you replace Steph with like a normal star guard, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or something, like the way they play is so attuned to Steph's skill set specifically that if you took him out, like they'd be one of the worst clutch teams in the NBA. So, yeah, I'm taking Steph. I feel pretty comfortable with that. Maybe LeBron has the case. Other than that, I'm kind of at a loss.
Riley?
I do think LeBron has a case, but I also went Steph. He's shooting, I believe I checked, it was like 50% from the field, 46% from three in the clutch this year. He's
Ridiculous.
just, I mean, I don't think there's anyone else you can really think about. He's just been incredible in the clutch.
Yeah, I'm going Curry as well. League leader in clutch points. It's pretty clear.
Clean sweep. So we had this was pretty fun. We had AD, the Claw, Curry for MVP. AD got a clean sweep for the Defensive Player of the Year. Rui for Sam for MVP or Most Improved Player, Comeback of the Year, and then Kuminga twice. Shout out D'Lo, obviously, and then Pod 3 times, and then the Chef again, clutch. So, thank you. That was a fun segment.
Yeah. And Sam, we're going to wrap up here. We just want to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been great hearing your takes as a professional in the sports industry. It's really cool, and especially in the NBA. You know, that's what you do. This is you're a master at this. It's really cool to see you talk about it. And yeah, we all really, really appreciate you hopping on with us.
Yeah, it's really cool that you guys get to do this as a class.
All right, guys, that's wrapping up episode 3 of the Hoops Harbor Pacific Waves podcast. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Sam Quinn. Follow Sam Quinn on Twitter at SamQuinnCBS, and check him out on CBSSports.com. Also, check us out on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter at Hoops Harbor Pod. We will see